It is with great pleasure that I am able to introduce to you Mr. Dan Harris.
How you doing, buddy?
This is a man who has worked in the highest levels of media, very intense, pressured situation, and came out with a book called 10% Happier. Huge success, and I'm just wondering, what on earth did your colleagues say when that came out to such rousing success? I mean, were they a little worried about whether you were still going to be able to do your thing?
No, they were like, how can I do that?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we all want eyeballs, right?
Yeah. Great. Well,
Thank you very
thanks.
much. Appreciate it. I have something to say about Jim, but I'll wait till the end for that.
I have to go now.
About a year and a half ago, my wife and I had our first kid, and a couple of days afterwards, I found myself in the middle of the night holding this screaming beast, and there was poop everywhere, and I was sleep deprived, and I had this insight, which is that the title of my next book is going to be "Everything in My Last Book Was Bullshit." When I am unregulated by the FCC, I swear a lot. If you had told me a couple years ago that I was going to become a traveling evangelist for meditation, I would have coughed my beer up through my nose. This was not something that I saw coming. But funny things happen, and for me, it started, as Jim made an oblique reference to this, it started with a panic attack live on national television on a little show we do at ABC News called Good Morning America. This was in the year 2004. Because I'm a huge masochist, I actually asked our research department to find out exactly how many people were watching, and they came back with the vastly reassuring number of 5.019 million. So no big deal. Since you're already enjoying my pain, I am going to show you a video clip of what happened so you can go even deeper into the schadenfreude you're already showing me here. And in this clip, I give you a sort of blow-by-blow of my on-air Waterloo. Here we go.
From ABC News, this is Good Morning America.
Welcome to the most embarrassing day of my life.
We're going to go now to Dan Harris, who's at the news desk. Dan?
Good morning, Charlie and Diane. Thank you.
This is me 10 years ago, and the reason this is the most embarrassing day of my life is not that it looks like I've been attacked by a blow dryer and a can of hairspray. No, it's that I am about to freak out on national television.
Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol-lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
At this point, I realize I'm helpless, so I bail right in the middle.
That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
All right, thanks very much. Dan Harris at the news desk with some of the headlines of the morning. Want to go to Tony Perkins now. He is...
Once the fear subsided, humiliation rushed in. I knew with rock-solid certainty that I had just had a panic attack on national television.
So I've watched that like thousands of times now, and it sucks every time. I get two reactions to that. If you've ever had a taste of panic, you know exactly what you're looking at. Other people look at it and say, it wasn't that bad. Really doesn't make a difference because I know what was going on for me, and it sucked uncontrollably. And interestingly, what's even more embarrassing is the backstory. I think at the root of that freak out is something that I assume everybody in this room shares, which is a desire to be great at what you do. I arrived at ABC News at the tender age of 28. This is the picture they took of me on my first day. I've begged and begged, and they still won't remove it from my security ID. A friend of mine has joked that if you take a wide shot, it looks like I might be holding a balloon in this picture. I was, as I said, 28, green, and deeply insecure about being green, and yet working with some of the giants in my industry, Peter Jennings, Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer. And my way of coping with my insecurity was to become a workaholic. I just threw myself into the job, and I had this motto that was bequeathed to me by my dad, who's a doctor up in Boston, and his motto is, "The price of security is insecurity." It'll shock you to hear that my father is Jewish. Got some Hebes in the room, nice. So I really took that motto to heart. I just had this constant thought loop of how good was my last story? What's my next story going to be? Who's getting a story that I want? What's my relationship with the anchors right now? What's my relationship with the bosses? Blah, blah, blah. And I firmly believe that any success that I was achieving was directly correlated to the intensity of this anxiety loop. Not long after I arrived at ABC, 9/11 happened, and I raised my hand and volunteered to go overseas to cover whatever happened next, and my bosses agreed to send me, and this is a picture of me with some nice young gentlemen from the Taliban. This is right after 9/11. I was sent to southern Afghanistan while the Americans were bombing and the Taliban was still in control. And the truth is, I really liked it. It's not that I liked violence. I don't like violence. I didn't even play contact sports as a kid. But I felt like the work was really important. And there's an expression, there's nothing more thrilling than the bullet that misses you. And I got pretty lucky that they all missed. Not true for all of my friends, however, but I really liked it and felt it was important work. And I spent many years after this picture was taken in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza. I made 6 or 7 trips to Iraq. And when I came home after one really long run in Iraq, where I had to cover the pre-invasion, the invasion, and then all the way up to the beginnings of the insurgency, so I was there for like 5 or 6 months on and off, and I came home and I got depressed. Although I didn't even know I was depressed, I was exhibiting what I now know to be some of the signs and symptoms. I was having trouble getting out of bed. I felt like I had a low-grade fever all the time. And at this point, I did a toweringly stupid thing, which is I started to self-medicate with recreational drugs, including cocaine and ecstasy. This is when the room always gets really quiet. I hasten to add that it wasn't like that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, where they're like popping ludes every minute, but my drug use was pretty intermittent. Never when I was at work, definitely not when I was on the air. As I like to say, I was stupid, but not that stupid. So after the panic attack, I had no idea what had gone wrong, really. I went to a doctor, actually not far from here, a shrink who's an expert in panic, and he asked me a series of questions to try to get to the root of the problem. And one of the questions was, do you do drugs? So I kind of sheepishly said, yeah, I do. And he leaned back in his chair and gave me a look that communicated the following sentiment, which was, okay, asshole, mystery solved. And he explained, yeah, it's funny now. He explained that even though I hadn't been doing drugs that much and for not even that long a period of time, it was enough to artificially raise the level of adrenaline in my brain and prime me to have this panic attack. And so that was a huge aha moment for me. I realized I made 2 big decisions. After realizing what a moron I'd been, I decided to quit doing drugs, which is kind of a no-brainer. And since quitting doing drugs is not a small thing, I agreed to go see this doctor once or twice a week indefinitely. I still see him. This, however, is not a neat and tidy story where I quit doing drugs and start meditating and life is all unicorns and rainbows. Something else had to happen, actually, and it came in the form of this guy, Peter Jennings, who's no longer with us, but was my mentor for many years. And he took me aside one day and said, you, Dan Harris, are going to start covering faith and spirituality for ABC News. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I was raised in the People's Republic of Massachusetts. Both of my parents are secular scientists, like pretty hardcore atheists. I did have a bar mitzvah, but I did this only for the money. So I this was not like an area of interest for me. I mean, money was, but not religion. And Peter did not care. He said, you are going to do it anyway. So I spent many years after this in mosques and megachurches and Mormon temples, and it was great. I made a lot of new friends. I saw how ignorant I had been on this subject, and I really saw the value of having a worldview that transcends your own narrow interests, which was useful for a young reporter on the make. That being said, none of what I encountered spoke to me personally. I didn't, go kosher or join a church or anything like that until the year 2008. So many years after the panic attack and many years after I started covering faith and spirituality, one of my producer colleagues recommended that I read a book by this guy, Eckhart Tolle. Some people are making sort of positive sort of noises. I warn you in advance, I'm going to mock him mercilessly as we proceed. So I never heard of this guy, but he is, for the uninitiated, a mega best-selling self-help guru. And I learned that Oprah Winfrey liked him so much that she has put copies of his books in every bedroom and every home she owns. And Paris Hilton was seen carrying one of his books when she went into jail for DUI. So I thought, all right, it was weird enough for an ABC News story. So I ordered one of his books, and it came in the mail, and I started to read it. And my initial diagnosis, this is the scientific term for my initial diagnosis, was bullshit. Like hardcore bullshit. This book was filled with pseudoscientific language about vibrational fields and grandiose claims about how the book is going to provoke for you a spiritual awakening, whatever that means. And after his own spiritual awakening, he says he lived on park benches in a state of bliss in the city of London for 2 years. And I will admit up front, I'm not a meteorologist, but I think they have winter in London. So I was not impressed by this gentleman, but I did continue to read, largely out of deference to my producer friend, and I'm glad I did, because Eckhart Tolle started to unfurl a thesis about the human situation that I'd never heard before. I'd never heard this before. His argument is that we all have a voice in our head, by which he's not referring to schizophrenia or hearing voices. He's talking about your inner narrator that chases you out of bed in the morning and is yammering at you all day long. And it has you constantly wanting stuff, not wanting stuff, judging people, comparing yourself to other people, criticizing yourself. Here's one of the hallmarks: thinking about the past or thinking about the future to the detriment of whatever's happening right now. I have a friend named Sam Harris. We're not related, but he also wrote a book about meditation, and he says when he thinks about the voice in his head, he feels like he's been hijacked by the most boring person alive, who just says the same shit over and over. Most of it negative, all of it self-referential. And Tolle's argument is when you're unaware of this nonstop conversation you're having with yourself, it yanks you around. This is why, you find yourself with your hand in the fridge and you're not hungry, or you're checking your email in the middle of a conversation with another Homo sapien, or you're losing your temper when it's strategically unwise. And for me, this was another aha moment, because I realized two things. One, this is just intuitively true. That's why people's heads are nodding. And two, this thesis about the human condition explained the most embarrassing moment of my life. It was the voice in the head that sent me off to war zones without really thinking about the psychological consequences. Then I came home, got depressed, was insufficiently self-aware to even know it. And then I blindly self-medicated, and it just blew up in my face. Suffice it to say, it was a little bit embarrassing to be reading a book by this guy and thinking he gets me. But the bigger problem really was that as I continued to read, I could not discern any practical or actionable advice in the book for dealing with the voice in the head. But I was really, really curious. So to the delight of my producer colleague, I agreed to interview Eckhart Tolle. I flew to Toronto and sat in a crappy little hotel room and face-to-face with Eckhart Tolle. And the first thing I asked him was, all right, man, what do you do about the voice in the head? And he took a beat and said, take one conscious breath. And the voice in my head was saying, what the hell does that mean? And I pressed him and pressed him and pressed him, and I gave him a lot of bites at the apple, and he was unwilling or unable to give me any advice that I could understand. And things got even weirder when I asked him at one point whether he ever gets into a bad mood, and I brought a little clip of that.
Don't you ever get annoyed, irritated, sad, anything negative?
No, I accept what is. And that's why life has become so simple.
Well, if somebody cuts you off in your car?
It's fine. It's like a sudden gust of wind. I don't personalize a gust of wind. And so it's simply what is.
And you're able to enjoy every moment, even if I start asking you a ton of annoying questions.
Yes, that would be fine. So it's really...
Don't tempt me.
A very frustrating man. I say this in my book. It was like he had pointed out that my hair was on fire and then refused to give me a fire extinguisher. And I just did not know what to do at this point. And so I did what I now, kind of regret, which is I threw myself into the world of self-help, which is, to spare you time and expense, not a pretty place, and filled with people who will tell you that you can solve all of your problems through the power of positive thinking, which, just cut to the chase, is not going to happen. And I can get on my high horse about this in the Q&A if anybody would like. But in the interest of moving things along, let me just say that I came home one night and I was kind of at wit's end, and my then fiance and now baby mama, Bianca, gave me a gift. She said, I've been hearing you talk with varying levels of cogency about Eckhart Tolle and the voice in the head and blah, blah, blah. And she said, it reminds me of a book that I read by this guy, Dr. Mark Epstein. So Epstein is a shrink right here in New York City, and he writes books about the overlap between psychology and Buddhism. And so I started to read his book that night, and I had another aha moment. Notwithstanding the fact that I was ostensibly a religion reporter, I actually didn't know anything about the Buddha, other than the fact that when I was a 15-year-old punk kid, I actually stole a Buddha statue from a local gardening store and put it in my bedroom because I thought it looked like cool or whatever, might impress the ladies. Statute of limitation on that has passed, I've been assured. So as I read the book, I realized that that all the stuff that I liked the most about Eckhart Tolle seemed to have been lifted largely without attribution from this guy, heretofore known to me only as a lawn ornament. 2,600 years before Tolle started cashing his royalty checks, it was this guy who was talking about the voice in the head. He had a different terminology. He called it the monkey mind. According to the Buddha, we're like little primates, just hurling ourselves through a forest of urges and impulses and desires, constantly latching onto things that will not last in a universe that is characterized by impermanence, and hurling ourselves from one hit of pleasant experience, one movie, one latte, one party, to the next, and yet never fully satisfied. As my meditation teacher likes to ask, how many vacations have you had? How many promotions? How many cocktails? And are you done? Of course not. We are insatiable. And in this way, the pursuit of happiness becomes the source of our unhappiness. And unlike Eckhart Tolle, the Buddha had a very simple, practical, actionable piece of advice for dealing with the voice in your head, your ego, your monkey mind, whatever you want to call it. The problem for me at this juncture was that what he was recommending sounded repellent. The punchline, he was recommending meditation. I thought it was for people like this who live in a yurt and are really into aromatherapy and Cat Stevens and John Tesh and wear little finger symbols and use the word namaste without irony. I was not entirely wrong about that, unfortunately. My view of meditation at the time was summed up nicely by Alec Baldwin's character on 30 Rock, who said the following.
Meditation is a waste of time, like learning French or kissing after sex.
Just want to be clear. I don't actually hold those views, but I like the clip, so. I'm a big supporter of French, as a matter of fact. So I was not favorably inclined toward meditation. I think I've made that point well. But I started to look around, do a little research, and this was a little bit. This is the only time in my life where I've ever been ahead of any curve. This was a little bit before the mindfulness hype started ginning up, and so I had to do a little digging, and I found that what was happening was that meditation was being studied in the labs in a really robust way. And I think that I think it's worth saying now at the beginning of this conference that some of this science around meditation is at times at risk of being overhyped. So I think what's a safe way to think about it is that it's really in its early stages, but it strongly suggests a long list of tantalizing health benefits, and they include the lowering the release of stress hormones, lowering your blood pressure, boosting your immune system, mitigating depression and anxiety. This is where I think maybe the science is the strongest. Also ADHD, age-related cognitive decline. Meditation has also been shown to help with things like psoriasis and irritable bowel syndrome. And this is where things get sci-fi. In recent years, this is a real person. Mathieu Ricard, he's actually a well-known author and monk. In recent years, neuroscientists have been peering into the brains of meditators and finding that when you meditate, this is putting it a little flippantly, but you're kind of performing a sort of neurosurgery on yourself. You are changing your brain. And it's not just guys like this who wear robes, it's the rest of us. There's a study done at Harvard in 2011, took normal people who never meditated before, civilians, they scanned their brains, and then for 8 weeks, they had these people do a little bit of meditation every day, And at the end of the 8 weeks, they scanned their brains again. And what they found was that in the area of the brain associated with compassion and self-awareness, the gray matter literally grew. And in the area of the brain associated with stress, the gray matter literally shrank. So this was a really compelling thing for me to learn. It started to kind of adjust my attitude a little bit. The next thing I learned is that actually meditation does not necessarily entail a lot of the things that I had worried it might entail. For example, you don't have to sit in a funny position. This is one of our cats, Ruby. The woman who took this picture, whose name rhymes with Shmianka, does not like when I point out that this cat is basking in the reflective glow of the Real Housewives of New Jersey at this moment. You don't have to sit in a funny position. You don't have to join a group. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to wear special outfits. I talked about the Buddha before, but the mindfulness meditation, which is the kind of meditation that I recommend, and it's the kind that has been really studied the most in the labs, is derived from Buddhism, but it's been stripped of all the metaphysical claims and most of the lingo, although they've developed some of their own new lingo, which I also don't like. But it is pretty thoroughly secularized. It is also simple. It is not a complex thing to do. So I'm not going to make you do it, and I suspect a lot of you already do it actively, but let's just run through the 3 basic steps of mindfulness meditation for beginners. Sit comfortably with your back upright. You can close your eyes or not. That's for you, Jim Gimian. You then focus your full attention on the feeling of your breath coming in and out. You pick the spot where it's most prominent, your nose, your chest, your belly, and you're not thinking about your breath, you're just feeling the breath coming in and going out. And then the third step is the key, because as soon as you start to do this, you're going to lose your mind. You're going to start thinking about, where did gerbils run wild? Why did I say that dumb thing to my boss? Do I need a haircut? What's for lunch? Why did Dances with Wolves beat Goodfellas for Best Picture in 1991? Whatever. You're just going to go blah, 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 blah. And that is fine. That is the way the mind works. The whole game is just to notice when you've become distracted and to start again and again and again and again. And this is the bicep curl for your brain. And it's what shows up on the brain scans. So when I learned all of this, this is what changed my mind. And I started to meditate. This is a picture that Shmianka took of me on vacation with some opportunistic chickens trying to take my wallet. And I started with 5 to 10 minutes a day, and that's what I recommend everybody start with. And I'm not going to lie to you, it sucks. You know, it's like going to the gym. If you go to the gym and you're not panting and sweating, you are cheating. And if you start to meditate and it's all like you're just off into some thoughtless place, you are either enlightened, congratulations, or you have died. But Actually, I want to show this. I think we've been ill-served by the traditional art around meditation, which shows people like floating off into the cosmic ooze. That ain't how it goes. And also, let me just as a brief aside say, I was very happy that Time Magazine did this. I was very unhappy, however, about the model they chose, because this sends a message that meditation is only for Whole Food shoppers. And that is to use my favorite word, bullshit. You know, it was created by Indian people like 2,600 years ago, even before that. It's for everybody. And you will hear speakers at this conference, I'm very glad to point out, who will make that point in a better way than I can. But it's worth making, at least for me, briefly. Anyway, you're not going to look like this. You're not going to feel like this. I think a better way of representing the meditation experience is this. One of the big PR problems facing meditation is people think, I can't clear my mind. You don't have to clear your mind. The point is to focus the mind for nanoseconds at a time on your breath or whatever, and then you get lost a million times and start over a million times. That is meditation. So I did it for a couple weeks, and I started to see two big benefits in my life. One was focus, this daily exercise of trying to focus on one thing at a time, my breath, getting lost, starting again, getting lost, starting again, really helped me stay on task. You know, I think we all have stressful jobs, but in my job, I literally have other people's voices pumped directly into my head, and I have to, you know, keep it together and get it right in front of millions of people on short deadlines, and I found that this daily exercise was very useful. But the bigger one is this word mindfulness. When I suspect most of the people in this room know what that word means because you're here, and it's become like a buzzword. I also fear, however, that it's used a lot and people don't really tell you what it means, so I'm just going to define it in my way, because it's an ancient word. It has a lot of meanings, but one way to describe it is it's the ability to know what's happening in your head right now without getting carried away by it. I say that again in a different way slightly, because mostly what I do is swear and tell jokes, but this part is actually useful. It is the skill of knowing what's happening right now in your mind without necessarily taking the bait and acting on it. Just as an absurd example, if you're standing online at Starbucks and somebody cuts you off, how does that moment go for most of you? I think it goes like this. You have this uninvited thought, which is like, who the hell is this? I'm pissed. And then you automatically, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your automatic reaction to it. With mindfulness on board, with the self-awareness that is generated through watching your mind, having this daily collision with the asshole in your head, that moment might 10% of the time go a little bit differently. You might notice, my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting pissed. But you don't have to take the bait and act on it. It's a little bit like the picture-in-picture button on your remote control. All of a sudden, the story that's taken up the full screen can be seen with some perspective. Another way to think about it, and the reason why this looks like shit is because I drew it. John Kabat-Zinn talks about the mind being like a waterfall. The rushing water is our stream of consciousness, mostly me thoughts. And mindfulness is the area behind, in the rock face behind the water that allows you to, and I'm mixing metaphors here, step out of the traffic and view the contents of your consciousness with some non-judgmental remove. Just in case you think I'm making this up, we are classified as Homo sapiens sapiens, the one who thinks and knows he or she thinks. And yet that second sapiens has atrophied over time because nobody bothers to point out to us that we have this like bonus level in our mind and brain that allows us to, again, step out of the traffic and view what's happening in our mind without getting caught up in the stories. Just back to Starbucks for a second. I suspect some of you type A drivers are thinking, am I not justified in getting pissed? I would argue, yes, you are sometimes, but probably not as much as you think. But the proposition here really is not that you should be rendered into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things instead of reacting blindly. Most of these meditation cliches that you'll probably get a fire hose full of them in the next couple of days, most of them make me want to put a pencil through my eye, but this one is a venerable meditation cliche, but responding, not reacting, is a game-changing proposition. And it is why we're now seeing meditation being picked up in some really surprising places. Google, Procter & Gamble, Aetna, Target, General Mills. General Mills, by the way, these are the people that make Hamburger Helper. And they have meditation rooms in every building in their corporate campus in Minnetonka, Minnesota. This is an article from Wired magazine where they talk about how it's also taking off. Mindfulness is also taking off in Silicon Valley. They say in here that it's become. This is the quote they use: that meditation has become the tech world's "quote-unquote" new caffeine. I think it's deliciously ironic that the people who are developing the products and services that are destroying our ability to focus are now using this ancient technique to boost their own. But I think there's something to be learned there. It's also taking off in the sports world. This is the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, who, yes, did lose to my hometown cheaters, the Patriots, a couple years ago, but they have a meditation coach. Novak Djokovic, who's been tearing it up lately, pretty serious meditator, a lot of Olympic athletes as well. The entertainment world is embracing it. This is the lead singer of Weezer. He meditates twice a day, 2 hours. Katy Perry, Lena Dunham, 50 Cent. He got shot 9 times. I think he deserves some peace of mind. You'll hear about this. I think this is really one of the most compelling areas. The U.S. military spending millions of dollars to take a look at whether mindfulness can make more effective soldiers and Marines in the field and more resilient warriors when they come home, less prone to the scourge of PTSD. All right, I'm almost done, but before I finish, I'm going to make a prediction, and before I make that prediction, I'm going to issue a caveat. Caveat is that my powers of prognostication historically have been very weak. In the early 2000s, I convinced my younger brother to invest in the company that made the Palm Pilot. We didn't get our money back on that one. That being said, I believe that meditation is really the next big public health revolution. I think in the not too distant future, we're going to be thinking about mental exercise the same way we think about physical exercise right now, which is that we all do it, and if we don't do it, we feel guilty about it. Think about physical exercise. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, "Who's chasing you?" And what happened? The scientists swooped in. They demonstrated the manifold physiological and psychological benefits of exercise. And like I said, now we all do it. And if we don't do it, we feel guilty about it. That being said, I don't think meditation is going to solve all of your problems. It is not a panacea. And that's why I called my book 10% Happier. It's not going to, as I've learned the hard way, regrow your hair or make you tall. But it can make a significant difference, and I sometimes believe that the 10% compounds annually. In many ways, I'm still the same guy I was in that picture I showed you at the beginning where I'm holding a balloon. I still believe the price of security is insecurity. I think if you're going to do anything great, it does require a certain amount of stress and plotting and planning. I'm still extremely ambitious. I would take a promotion if my bosses are watching. I'm going to write more books. I have an app that teaches people how to meditate, 10% Happier, available in the iTunes store right now. It's an early version. Check it out. Let me know what you think. I'm hosting a game show. I'm doing all sorts of stuff, and meditation does not stop me from wanting to be effective in the world. What it does is help me draw the line between useless rumination and what I call constructive anguish. You can use that. That being said, if my wife were here, she would give you the 90% still a moron speech. My little brother, the one who lost all that money on the Palm Pilot, has said that the book should be titled From Deeply Flawed to Merely Flawed. I think at the core of this is something really radical and empowering, which is that happiness, which most of us assume consciously or subconsciously, is contingent upon exogenous factors like the quality of your childhood, the quality of your work life, the quality of your marriage, all of which are super important. I don't want to downplay that. But in fact, what the science is showing us is that happiness is a skill that can be practiced just the way you can practice boosting your bicep in the gym. And that's huge. So I'll leave you with my little tagline, which is, if it can work for a fidgety, skeptical newsman, it can work for you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I just want to, we have a couple minutes for Q&A if anybody wants to ask a question. If you don't, that's totally cool. But let me just briefly say, we do have a question right here. Let me just briefly say a big thank you to Jim and Barry from Mindful. These guys have placed themselves very effectively at the nexus of this still small but growing and very interesting mindfulness world. They have, for me, been an incredible source of not only support but also advice and guidance for many years, telling me when I'm being an idiot and helping. They were very involved in helping me clean up the book and figure out what I should do next and all that stuff. So get to know these guys if you're interested in mindfulness. They will be of great use. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dan. We had a nanosecond in the hallway to broach this topic. I think many of the people that are here either are directly or indirectly with their colleagues leading health benefits and behavioral health benefits in their corporations. So my question is that it seems as though in the UK, who might be a little farther advanced in bringing this into society in a secular way, and in Canada, perhaps, not so sure about South Africa and Australia yet, but is there a tendency here to diverge mindfulness from mental health? I really appreciated your personal story, both in your book and here today, about bridging that gap. But do you think there's perhaps a calculated risk that we might take if we bridge the gap between mental health and what mindfulness can do for this area that's really suffering in terms of access?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have the whole answer to this, but I suspect that part of why this has happened is that the people like me who are trying to make meditation more acceptable to a broader audience are trying to say it's for well people, you know, it's for successful people who want to be more successful and less of an asshole. And so I tend not to lean too hard in my cell on mental health issues. And yet I've suffered from the trifecta. I've had depression, anxiety, and panic, and drug abuse. So I think it's great for both, but I think it really just depends on who is doing the talking. So that's probably all I'll say on that. Any other questions, or should I let you carry on? Oh, right here.
What do your skeptic parents think about all this?
What do my skeptic parents think about all this? So my mom is now a meditator. So my mom meditates. My father does not. We went to. I actually dragged them to an event for the Insight Meditation Society, and my dad fell asleep. Oh yeah, so Barry, thank you. Right before I was about to publish the book, my mom had some advice, which was, don't do it. This was I'm talking like right before the book came out. It was printed, it was sitting in warehouses, and she begged me, don't do it, this is gonna ruin your career. And I went into a tailspin, I went to, I'm prone to tailspins, and I went to Diane Sawyer. I happened to have a meeting with her that day, and I was freaking out, and she was like, I love your mother, but she's wrong, you're gonna be fine. And now my mother, brags about the book all the time. So there you go. She also told me not to go into TV news. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.